Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Adventures of the Windswift. In this video we're going to look at the Hastari Order. As a matter of fact, it's actually looking at all three orders that operate within the fantasy world of Braxia, where our characters find themselves every week. Now, there are three orders. There is the Order of the Anchors, who are responsible for protecting the 20 anchors that are placed around Braxia to keep the dragons in their pocket dimension. Those anchors are there to prevent anyone from moving into or out of that dimension. They keep Braxia safe from the dragons. You then have the Order of the Oct Relicar. This is an order that is dedicated to hunting down dragon artifacts, dragon writing, dragon literature, dragon thoughts, dragon architecture, to hunt down any physical artifacts that the dragons left behind. Before they were expelled, the dragons had generated their own materials. They were warlords of the world of Braxia. They dominated, and then when they were expelled, they left everything behind. It's the Order of the Oct Relicar whose responsibility it is to go in and find those loathsome objects and destroy them before they can be used by anybody else, because their power is generally so great but so corrupting that they cannot be let to exist on the world of Braxia. And then finally, you have the Hastari Order. The Hastari Order has got the most difficult task in terms of everything not being black and white. They're responsible for hunting down individuals who are attempting to bring back the dragons. Now, these might be powerful wizards who are trying to open up dimensional gates. These could be powerful warlords who are trying to amass armies and are trying to hunt down ancient dragon artifacts. There's a grey line, of course, between when a warlord has an artifact, is it an Oct Relicar problem or is it a Hastari problem? The easiest way to look at it is the artifact is the problem of the Oct Relicar, but the person wielding it is the problem of the Hastari. Now, bearing in mind, these three orders were formed just after the dragons were banished, and they were put into place primarily to make sure that the dragons could never return. There was a pact. It was known as the Treaty of the Orders. And in this treaty, every great race of Braxia signed this treaty. And what the treaty does effectively is when an order member they have a tattoo on their hand, on their palm, when that tattoo is illuminated, it means that they are operating under official order business, and they are given the utmost leniency. They literally can walk into the great pyramids at Takatumen and confront the Pharos of the Sajet Empire, claiming that he's a dragon worshipper. And if their hand is illuminated, the Pharos and his gods must submit to their judgment. That's an incredibly powerful ability. Even the Great Empire, an empire that has sworn to one day take over the world of Braxia, even the Great Empire, who have sworn this malevolent intent that they are going to take over the world, signed those treaties, and operative members who are not Great can walk freely amongst the citizens of the Great Empire, provided that their hand is illuminated. If their hand isn't illuminated, they will of course be executed on sight. So all of the great powers signed this treaty. Now, the effect of the treaty was to create basically a world peace. Every single empire had signed an accord in agreement to protect the world of Braxia from dragons. It opened up trade negotiations, it opened up all kinds of things. It unfortunately also ensured that any kind of build-up of power that seemed to be heading towards trying to undo something that the dragons had done was going to get persecuted by the orders. And what that did was the Drow Republic, once they had managed to take over the dwarvish citadels in the Underdark, the dwarves had been wiped out in a tragic battle with the dragons, but the below-surface dwarves had been obliterated. The Drow Republic took over those citadels, and once the treaty was signed, the above-surface dwarves who wanted to reclaim those citadels suddenly couldn't. They were banned from doing so because it was an act that was done during the time of the dragon banishment. And so it's seen as being this very grey act, this very grey area. As a result, for at least the next 300 years, the Drow have been given control over those dwarvish territories. Now that makes the dwarves very bitter about this treaty, but they also understand that the treaty does protect their above surface interests greatly, so they allow it to continue. But I digress. Back to the orders. The orders. So each order has a Lord Archon. There are 3 Lord Archons. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows where they are. They operate apparently in independence of one another, again to try and keep everything safe. These Lord Archons are responsible for coordinating all of the lower forces into destroying and keeping the dragons at bay. Each of the Archons has a bevy each of the Lord Archons, I should say, has a bevy of Archons. Those Archons, and there's 10 of them, they are responsible for different areas around Braxia. Now, these Archons, of course, they are there to coordinate the efforts of the deacons and the captains. They're there to ensure that there is flow of communication. If one Archon from the Oct Relicar discovers that there were people who were digging up these artifacts, they hand that information over to the Archons from the Hastari. If the Hastari discover that someone is tampering with the anchors, they let the Order of the Anchors Archons know, and so forth. And that keeps the whole system working. Now, the Archons, of course, cannot be expected to remember everything that has been uncovered for the last 300 years. Elves, although they do certainly serve, and of course Braxia has 3 different types of elves that we know of. That's actually 4, but 5 actually, but there's only 3 that are active in the orders. Not all of them serve at these higher ranks. So humans, short-lived species like the tieflings, the Wraith, those kinds of individuals who serve, they have to be reminded of history, historical fact. An elvish plot might take 300 or 400 years to unfold, and so preceding Archons need to be told what was happening 100 years before. And to do that, we have the Tetra Khan'S. Now, the Tetra Khan'S are the individuals who are responsible for the oracles, but they're also responsible for the maintenance of knowledge and lore. They are the record keepers of the Order of Hastari, of the Oct Relicar, and of the Anchors. Now, the Tetra Khan'S, again, their numbers are not particularly known. They're secreted away in different buildings, different cities all over the world, gathering this knowledge, gathering this information, which then they can share and send out through the Oracle network. The deacons, of course, then operate underneath the Archons, and the deacons ensure that the immediate orders of the Archons are disseminated out to the captains, and also relieve the burden of the Archons having to control the day-to-day operations of those airships and of the maintenance of the kingdoms. The deacons are responsible for the captains, and then the captains, of course, are the lowest rung, if you like, within the order. Underneath the captains are all of the non-commissioned officers, people like Lieutenant Tai, for example. They are the individuals who serve aboard the airships, but who are not considered technically members of the order. They are assistants to the order. That kind of thing. And there's a reason for it. Their hands don't have the power to light up, and that is simply because of the amount of power that is beholden to anyone who has an illuminated palm. Now, the captains obviously need to be able to operate and make decisions on the fly and on their own. The Oracle network, although it's vast and it spans the entire globe as well as going into the Underdark, it can take some time to get responses back from deacons and from Archons. Of course, we're global, so a deacon might be asleep, might be in a different side of the planet, might only be waking up, might be going to bed. Anyway, so the captains need to have a certain amount of freedom to act. And that's where we get to the edicts. Now, the edicts for each of the orders are fairly similar, and I'm going to go through the edicts here of the Order of the Hastari. Now, the edicts were established during the Treaty of the Orders, as I have said, that was established 21 years after the banishment of the dragon, and all major powers signed them. Now, Edict number 1. The Hastari Order is the conscience of the 3 orders. It is responsible for monitoring, tracking, and eliminating those who would defy the general orders of the Great Alliance. The Hastari is tasked with seeking out those who would consort with dragons, worship or promote draconic ways, seek to communicate with dragons, attempt to open portals or rifts to the draconic prison dimension, possess or seek to possess draconic knowledge or powers, engage others through action or thought to sympathize with dragons, use draconic lore or knowledge for personal gain, actively know or in the past attempt to restore the power of the dragons, actively now or in the past attempt to restore the dragons, knowingly allow others to perform any of the above actions, helping others to perform any of the above actions, or harboring those who would perform any of the above actions. So that's a very broad spectrum of things, but there's some very specific words in there. Use draconic lore for knowledge or knowledge for personal gain. Personal gain. So the Order is aware that the dragons knew a lot of things, and the dragons were powerful for a reason. So one has to be very careful with how one approaches that. And of course that then starts to step on the toes of the Oct Relicar. If you've got a book that belongs to the dragons, that's Oct Relicar domain. What are you doing with it? In that case, the mandate, the moment the Order of the Hastari or the Anchors find a relic, they are required to immediately contact their oracle and get the oracle to contact the Order of the Oct Relicar to send somebody to come and claim these artifacts. Edict number 2 is roles. What are the roles of the Hastari? Actively support and work with other orders. That's obviously of paramount importance. There isn't really any animosity between the three as they have different jurisdictions, and then there's no real reward or prestige for apprehending enemies of the orders. Because of the secret nature of the orders, oftentimes they don't know who they are. It's the glowing symbol that really gives them the authority to act. Uphold the name and honor of the orders at all times. Now, obviously, the Order represents a treaty that's very, very powerful. That means that the Order operatives have to make sure that they don't abuse that, and they don't make other nations wonder if they should renege or remove themselves from that particular treaty. That would be terrifically bad for the orders that lose the funding that those nations provide, as well as, of course, the ability to actually respond to threats in those particular nations. Represent the Order in all matters, inform with all due haste other orders of discoveries that fall within their domain and not that of the Order of the Hastari, as we've spoken about, support ruling monarchs and recognize leaders in any matters pertaining to dragons or draconic activity. Now, this is a particularly important one. The monarchs, the rulers, yes, if they are actually engaging in draconic activity, they can be arrested and tried by the Hastari as per these edicts. However, the Hastari, of course, has to recognize that these are the people who pay for everything in the first place, and so there has to be a certain amount of respect and support. And of course act as ambassadors for the Hastari. Now, Edict 3 talks about the chains of command. The captains of the fleet of the Hastari have sole mandate in all operations aboard their vessel and in the execution of their investigations once the deacons responsible for the captains have given consent for their intended actions by the oracle, causing the sigil of the Order to illuminate. So once that Order sigil is illuminated, once that palm symbol is illuminated, that's it. The captains are free to act as they need to bring about the successful conclusion of that investigation. So they can do almost anything that they think is warranted. Now, of course, if they execute the Pharos, there's going to be a huge amount of investigations post that to make sure that there is sufficient evidence that the actions taken were correct. Of course, if that were to happen and the captains were found to have had no evidence whatsoever, there would be a serious inquiry as to how that sigil was illuminated in the first place. And yes, so the Archon for the Deacon has given consent for the Deacon to proceed. That's to illuminate the symbol. Captains are free to operate their vessels in whatever manner they so choose. However, they shall cease all independent operation if the Deacon issues a mandate or authorized operation, which has been authorized by the Archon. So the captains are free to operate. They can trade. They can operate their ship how they want. So if they find a crew member who's committed a crime, they are free to determine how that crime is executed. Now, there's an interesting thing here that happens when a member joins the Order, whether it's the Anchors, the Oct Relicar, or the Hastari. When they join, they automatically renounce their citizenship of whatever nation they came from. So a Graith who joins the Order, and there are several, is no longer considered Graith. They are considered part of the Order, which is, if you will, a separate entity on its own. So the captains, once they're on their vessel, those vessels are considered Order property. When they're on that vessel, they really are masters of the domain and can choose how they execute their decisions. Literally, whether that's to execute their crew or to pay them double or to pay them half or however they want to operate, it's entirely their call. So the captains may enlist any and all manner of individuals into their charge to a maximum of 150 gold pieces per month. That's what the Order will pay. Thereafter, the captains need to supplement the support given by the Order with their own revenue streams. That's where that trading starts to come in. Edict 4, Authority. Captains and above rank are given the following authority. Commandeer property, item, persons deemed of critical importance to the Order's success, where such success would depend on the item in question, to a value of 8,000 standard gold pieces. So they can requisition someone. They couldn't requisition the Prince of the Realm to work for them, because arguably the Prince of the Realm is worth more than 8,000 gold pieces. But they certainly could requisition captains. They could requisition small levies of men, for example, from the local duke. That's the sort of thing that they can do. They can enter all chambers and rooms and places where a captain's rank might permit in all nations signed to the Order Pact. So they can enter wherever they like, requisition items and finances from the Order to the sum of 500 standard gold pieces per month. So that's a special over and above operational cost that they can call for. Arrest and or detain public citizens of any nation for a period no longer than 6 days without due cause and reason being cited to the deacon within 24 hours. So they can hold you up for up to 6 days without letting that deacon know. Thereafter, they must do so. Where the sigil is active, they can commandeer any property without limit. They can enter all chambers. They can requisition all amounts of items from the Order. They can detain or arrest anybody who has violated any of the laws of the Hastari and keep them arrested for as long as they deem necessary, or they can execute without trial any individual caught violating Edict 1. So if their hands are illuminated, that's what they can do. That's very, very, very powerful. Very powerful. Now, here's some restrictions. Under no circumstances ever, including Edict 4, may the captains or deacons enter into the engineer forges aboard the Order vessels. Now, that's into the engine room. They are never allowed in there. Under no circumstances does Edict 4 ever allow a captain to enter the chambers of an oracle or a Tetra Khan'S as well. So there's two areas that are absolutely fundamentally off limits. Think about how risky those areas must be if they can walk into the bedroom of a pharaoh or the bedroom of an emperor and not flinch, but they cannot walk into the engineering room or into the Tetra Khan'S room or into the oracle room alone in that particular case. In the case of royalty, a degree of respect and temperament should be exercised to avoid international incidents. Edict 5, other orders. The Order is required to interact with, work with, and support to the fullest. They are to adhere to all of their edicts, not violate any of them. They are to conduct joint operations, and they are to work together, in which case jurisdiction is given to the Order that is most involved with the case in terms of it's an individual using an artifact. There, the Hastari would have precedence over the actual artifact, or it's an artifact using an individual, then the Order of the Oct Relicar would take precedence. Edict 6, autonomy and the rights of captains. As per Edict 3, the captains of the fleet are the backbone and they are considered lords of their vessel. So they can control their vessel as they so choose. If they're found violating any of the edicts, of course, the captains themselves will be punished, and that's usually either execution or sent off to the prison world of, the prison planet, I should say, of Naxa, which is a horrific prison place. So the captains of the Windswift have just encountered that. Edict number 7, in the event of the return of the dragons. So if the dragons come back, in the event that the dragons manage to return, all previous edicts are rescinded and replaced with Edict 7. And that's the following. The Lord Archon, in conjunction with all surviving Archons and Tetra Khan'S, are immediately executed. The responsibilities of the captains are to destroy the dragons at all costs. The only authority in power will be the captains. Deacons are to be executed on sight. In other words, what the orders are saying is that if the dragons come back, it is not a failure of the captains. It is a failure of the deacons, of the archons, of the oracles, of the Tetra Archon, of the Lord Archon. It is their fault, and that must mean they've been infiltrated. So by eradicating them all, by removing them all, that centralized form of control is taken away. So if that's been corrupted, that's removed. I beg your pardon, the captains are free to operate as they so choose to bring about the end of the dragons. That's a very powerful edict, and hopefully one that we will never have to see. And so that, in quite a long video actually, is the entire tenet of the Order of the Hastari. They're given a lot of leeway. There's a lot of opportunity for the captains to make their own decisions. Once their hand is illuminated, they basically become gods on the planet's surface, and they can go as and where they choose and do basically what they want as well. But there is that ever-present edict which says they represent the order. Edict 2 is all about keeping those relationships alive with the supporting countries, with the supporting kingdoms and so on. Now, something that's very important to bear in mind, and this is not covered in the edicts, but it would be referred to as almost the non-written law of the orders. They do not interfere in any situation that does not relate directly to their Edict 1. If someone is committing a crime, the order captains have no authority, no responsibility to react to that. If it is a standard crime, if it's a criminal event, if it's a lord being petty and invading another country, if it's a civil war, if it's a national war, the order is not responsible for any of that and should not get involved in that either. There are other orders, there are other operations. Each empire has got its own intelligence agencies and their own guards and sheriffs and that sort of thing. The order is not expected to intervene and should not intervene either. It would be seen as the order giving favor to one nation over the other, and all nations here are involved in this order support. So that puts us in a very interesting situation if the orders were to start to get privy of things happening that would cause issue and that have nothing to do with the dragons. Anyway, thank you for watching the Adventures of the Windswift and for being so interested in this setting. That there's been lots of discussion and debate over the authority of the orders, and that's actually what's inspired this video. Was I thought, well, let me lay it bare, let me make it available to everybody. And bear in mind, of course, our dear captains are only players and they don't sit there with the edicts next to them. And it really is about the captains being in charge of their own destiny, their own ships, and perhaps they might forget a rule or two. But as long as they don't violate the edicts, that's okay. And some of them have come very close to violating those edicts, I might add. But anyway, that's for another video. Until next time, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, spread the word of the Adventures of the Windswift as we now move into Season 5 of the Adventures of the Windswift. And I think we've got a pretty good crew. The captains are all finding their feet, so to speak. And the adventures that await us are going to blow your mind. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Goodbye.